You know the rhyme, everyone does, but behind the sing-song words lies a disturbing truth. Humpty Dumpty was never an egg. It was a deadly 17th century drink, strong enough to ruin lives on contact. Its fall was the collapse of real men, broken by their own vices, while neighbors stood powerless. So how did this warning vanish beneath a children's riddle? The real story begins far darker than you've ever heard. Brandy sloshes into battered tin mugs, mixing with dark ale pulled from the cask. In the back rooms of Restoration London, the ritual is quick and unceremonious. Cheap brandy, 2, maybe 3 ounces, poured over a quart of strong ale, a spoonful of coarse sugar, and a scrape of nutmeg for those who can spare it. The liquid is heated until it steams, sometimes with an iron pulled straight from the fire. The hiss and crackle fill the air, mingling with the sweat and tobacco smoke of men crowding shoulder to shoulder. Sailors fresh off the docks, laborers with raw hands, all gathered for warmth and a hard escape. The drink bites hot and sweet, burning down the throat, flooding bellies empty from a day's work. Faces flush, voices rise. The effect is swift, shoulders slump, spines curl, and bodies sag against the tables. Some laugh, some mumble, some simply go silent, eyes glazed as the room tilts. The name fits, Humpty. For the humped backs, Dumpty for the collapse that follows. By midnight, the floor is littered with men too far gone to rise, the air thick with the stink of spilled drink and lost wages. No one asks for a second. They just tip the last of it back and wait for the world to go dark. Francis Grose's 1785 Classical Dictionary of the Vulgar Tongue sits heavy on the shelf, its pages listing the language of the street and the tavern with blunt honesty. There, under H, the entry reads that Humpty Dumpty was a short, clumsy person of either sex, and also ale, boiled with brandy. The Oxford English Dictionary echoes this, tracing the phrase back to the late 1600s, confirming its place in the world long before any nursery rhyme. These are not idle rumors or folk tales passed from mouth to mouth. These are formal records compiled by men whose job it was to pin down the shifting slang of their time. The words on the page are evidence. Humpty Dumpty was known, classified, and understood as both a drink and the ruin it caused. In the year 1701, a satirical poem called A Rod for Tunbridge Bows surfaces again, woven into ridicule and lampoon, showing how deeply the term had sunk into public life. Each citation and each dictionary entry builds a paper trail that winds through the alleys and alehouses, outlasting the lives it described. Long before children chanted the rhyme, the words had already done their work, describing collapse not as a puzzle but as a fact of daily existence. The lexicographers, with their ink and patience, left no doubt. Humpty Dumpty was real, and everyone knew what it meant. The words first appeared in print in 1797, bound in Samuel Arnold's Juvenile Amusements. The stanza sits alone on the page. Humpty Dumpty sat on a wall. Humpty Dumpty had a great fall. 80 men and 80 more could not make Humpty Dumpty where he was before. No mention of kings, no horses, no eggs, just a wall, a fall, and a crowd unable to help. The meaning is plain and unvarnished. In the cramped rooms of London's poorer wards, a man slumps against a low stone wall outside the tavern, his body heavy and unresponsive. Neighbors gather, their hands under his arms, straining to lift him upright. 60, 80, 160 men, the rhyme insists. No number is enough. The body does not rise. The eyes do not focus. The weight is too much, not just of flesh and bone, but of everything that has led him here. The silence grows, broken only by the scrape of boots on cobblestone. The community stands helpless, unable to restore what has been lost. The fall is final. The words linger, heavy and unresolved, before the page turns and the world moves on. Across Europe, echoes of irreparable loss run through old children's verses. In Denmark, a rhyme called Lille Trill tells of a small boy who sits atop a wall, tumbles down, and splits open like overripe fruit. The children recite the lines with a kind of nervous delight, watching as the story ends not with rescue, but with a body that cannot be mended. In Germany, the story shifts to Pumpelkin, a figure who climbs a church steeple during a wedding, only to fall and shatter. Prayers and pleas follow, but the outcome is always the same. Gravity wins, and no blessing can undo the break. Folklorists have traced these motifs through rural songbooks and oral tradition, noting how the theme repeats: something precious, once broken, cannot be restored. Yet in Britain, the rhyme's roots reach deeper into everyday ruin. While Danish and German versions dwell on accident and fate, the English verse wraps its lesson around the collapse of the body and the spirit, shaped by the realities of drink and the limits of community. These are not simply tales for children, but warnings carried forward in rhyme, each culture offering its own account of what cannot be fixed. By the early 1800s, the rhyme's sharp edges began to dull. Humpty Dumpty, once a figure of ruin and collapse, started to take on a new shape in the public eye. In 1810, a slim chapbook called Gammer Gurton's Garland appeared with a simple riddle. What sits on a wall falls and cannot be fixed? The answer was an EGG. Illustrators picked up their pens, and the image of a fragile, wide-eyed egg perched on a crumbling wall slipped into print, softening the story's blow. Victorian publishers saw the appeal. The old darkness faded under the weight of nursery colors and rounded lines. But the rhyme was not finished changing. In 1813, a new refrain surfaced in political circles: all the king's horses and all the king's men. Parliamentarians, locked in bitter debate over imperial missteps and colonial blunders, used the rhyme as a jab at royal authority. If even the king's might could not fix what was broken, what hope was left for the rest? The children's riddle became a weapon, its meaning twisted to serve the moment. Each new layer, egg, king, catastrophe, buried the original beneath something easier to swallow, but harder to trace. Tour guides in Colchester point to a battered stretch of medieval wall and tell a story. In 1648, a royalist cannon called Humpty Dumpty tumbled from its perch during the siege, and it could not be lifted again. The tale sounds convincing, until the timeline unravels. The cannon's supposed fall took place in the summer of 1648, but the first printed version of the rhyme does not surface until 1797, nearly a century and a half later, and it contains no mention of kings, horses, or men. Those famous lines, all the king's horses and all the king's men, do not appear in print until 1813, during a parliamentary debate. The egg, now inseparable from the rhyme, enters the picture in the early 1800s, with illustrations like those in Gammer Gurton's Garland, around 1810. The Colchester story, meanwhile, only gains traction in the late 20th century, promoted by local tourism boards from 1996 onward. The Richard III theory suffers the same fate. The king died in 1485, centuries before the rhyme's earliest record. Each claim collapses under the weight of the dates. The evidence is plain. A rhyme born in the late 1700s, reshaped through the 19th century, and only later draped in the trappings of war and monarchy. The timeline leaves no room for canons or kings. What remains is the original, a fall no one could mend, stripped of legend, laid bare by the clock. Even today, broken reputations and shattered trust rarely mend, with or without authorities' help. The core truth never changed. Some falls cannot be reversed. In a world so quick to rewrite darkness as innocence, we risk forgetting what real ruin looks like. Thanks for watching. Share your thoughts below.